Donc, c'est mon immense plaisir de présenter ce panel dans notre bloc recherche. Notre panel comprend 2 de mes collègues de l'Observatoire des droits humains aux Nations Unies. And this panel will take place primarily in French, so I will remind you to grab a translator if you don't have one with you. They're in the back corner by the sandwiches. So as you've heard today, our summit aims to build nuclear disarmament knowledge and capacity in our youth. Now we will welcome a PhD student and one of my colleagues from the Observatory, which is a research group, who will talk to us a bit about the role of research and academia in advocacy work. So I'll begin by presenting Clara. Maître Clara Laplante, avocate et candidate au doctorat en droit, se spécialise dans le droit des enfants, les droits de la personne, ainsi que le droit criminel et pénal. Ses recherches portent sur l'interaction entre la justice pénale pour adolescents et rationalité des droits de l'enfant. En particulier, Clara étudie la surreprésentation des jeunes racisés dans ce système et explore des solutions pour favoriser une meilleure intégration des droits de l'enfant dans le domaine criminel et pénal au Canada. Avocate bénévole au sein du comité de lutte contre le profilage racial de la clinique juridique de Saint-Michel à Montréal, Maître Laplante-Bédard est également membre de l'Observatoire des droits de l'homme à l'ONU, du laboratoire de recherche interdisciplinaire sur les droits de l'enfant et de l'Observatoire des profilages. Son parcours démontre son engagement constant pour les droits de la personne et en faveur d'un système de justice plus équitable et inclusif. Donc, je vous présente Clara.
Bonjour à tous. Merci d'être venus. En fait, merci pour l'invitation. Ça me fait vraiment plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Donc, je vais faire ma présentation en français, mais si jamais vous avez des questions en anglais, ça va me faire un plaisir d'y répondre aussi. Donc, comme Stéphanie l'a dit, en fait, je suis étudiante au doctorat. Je m'intéresse beaucoup aux droits de l'enfant. Donc, c'est un peu ça que j'ai parlé aujourd'hui. Donc, j'ai un bouton pour... Next slide. C'est ça? Ah, parfait. Donc, aujourd'hui, je vais vous parler d'un peu de la Convention relative aux droits de l'enfant. Donc, c'est une convention que le Canada a ratifiée. En fait, que le Canada a signée en 91. C'est une convention qui vient réaffirmer les droits de l'enfant. Et je trouvais ça particulièrement intéressant aujourd'hui d'en discuter dans le contexte du désarmement nucléaire parce qu'il y a beaucoup de ces droits de l'enfant là qui sont interconnectés. Donc, voilà. En fait, je vais vous la présenter un peu de manière générale et aussi des points que j'ai un peu pris pour parler directement du sujet. Donc, comme j'ai dit, c'est une convention qui vient promouvoir les droits de l'enfant, qui vient s'attarder à plusieurs points en droits de l'enfant, donc notamment l'intérêt supérieur de l'enfant, l'importance de prendre en considération les intérêts des enfants dans toutes les décisions que les gouvernements vont prendre ou toutes les décisions que les institutions publiques vont prendre aussi, le principe de la non-discrimination aussi, qui est super important, le droit à la vie, à la survie et au développement des enfants. Donc ça, c'est aussi quelque chose qui est fondamental dans la Convention. Et le droit des enfants d'être entendus. Donc, on en a un peu discuté tout à l'heure, l'importance d'être entendu, l'importance d'avoir des discussions qui sont multigénérationnelles sur certains droits et notamment le principe du désarmement nucléaire. Donc, voilà. Plus spécifiquement, en fait, j'ai ciblé deux principes. Donc, vous allez voir, il y a la partie en français, il y a aussi la même chose en anglais, juste pour vous aider. Donc, j'en discutais un peu à travers cette convention-là. Il y a le droit à la vie, à la survie et au développement. C'est un droit qui est absolument fondamental. C'est un droit qui est inhérent aux enfants, qui veut dire que, en fait, dès qu'on naît, on a un droit qui est inhérent à la vie. Les gouvernements devraient faire en sorte qu'on soit capable de vivre et de survivre et de se développer à notre plus grand potentiel, en fait. Il y a aussi des protections spécifiques que je trouvais particulièrement intéressantes, qui est la protection des enfants en temps de guerre. Donc, on en a parlé beaucoup, les panélistes du dernier panel aussi en ont parlé beaucoup, l'impact des armes nucléaires en temps de guerre sur les droits de tout le monde, mais notamment sur les droits des enfants. Le fait que c'est des armes qui sont absolument destructrices et qui sont indiscriminées, en fait. Donc, peu importe t'es qui, tu peux être affecté par ce genre d'armes. Et c'est pour ça, en fait, que c'est super important de prendre en considération ces droits-là quand on prend nos politiques publiques, pour être sûr que les positions qu'on prend au Canada respectent les engagements. Parce que c'est un engagement que le Canada a pris, que la majorité des États au monde a pris. C'est le traité le plus ratifié au monde. Il y a seulement un État qui ne l'a pas ratifié, et c'est nos voisins du Sud, pour d'autres raisons. Donc, c'est ça, on a parlé aussi beaucoup des effets à long terme et à court terme des bombes nucléaires, en fait. Donc, ça vient aussi toucher à ce droit qui est inhérent à la vie, au premier droit en haut. L'impact, en fait, qui est direct de la bombe nucléaire, mais aussi les impacts à court terme, à long terme. Donc, on a parlé notamment de la radioactivité après, des problèmes de santé graves après, et en fait, toute la capacité les impacts sur la capacité des jeunes à se développer, qui est quelque chose qu'il faudrait mettre de premier plan quand on parle de ces politiques-là. Donc, on a aussi parlé, une panéliste qui avait parlé aussi de l'impact irréversible sur les systèmes de santé, qui vient aussi toucher à ces droits-là fondamentaux que les enfants vont avoir. Je reviens un peu à la Convention. Vous allez voir, il y a 42 droits, en fait, dans cette Convention-là. Et c'est des droits qui viennent toucher un panoplie de facettes de la vie et qui pourraient être affectés par les bombes nucléaires. Donc, notamment, en fait, les droits qu'on va peut-être pas penser forcément, mais il y a un droit qui est super intéressant, qui est le droit au repos et au droit de jouer, qui est un droit qui est super intéressant parce que ça vient toucher à l'environnement. Le Comité des droits de l'enfant l'a rappelé récemment que c'est un droit qui est fondamental aux enfants, mais aussi qui est interrelié avec le droit à... Désolée. J'ai perdu mon fil, mais ça va venir. Qui est le droit à l'environnement, oui, parce qu'on a le droit de jouer, les enfants ont le droit de jouer dans un environnement qui est propre, sécuritaire et qui pourrait être compromis par l'existence des bombes nucléaires. Donc, voilà. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire quand on est jeune pour promouvoir nos droits et comment on peut les inclure dans ces discussions-là qu'on a aujourd'hui? En fait, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, il y a le droit à l'intérêt supérieur de l'enfant. Donc, c'est rappeler à nos élus l'importance de prendre en considération l'intérêt supérieur des enfants lorsqu'ils prennent des décisions. Donc, on peut faire ça aussi, l'importance de respecter la vie des enfants, qui est un droit fondamental aux enfants. C'est dès qu'on a la capacité d'exprimer notre opinion, cette opinion-là devrait être respectée et devrait être écoutée, en fait. L'importance d'écouter tout le monde lorsqu'on partage nos opinions. On a tous une opinion différente, l'importance de le prendre en considération aussi, peu importe l'âge qu'on a, et faire part de la conversation. Ce que je trouve formidable aujourd'hui, il y a beaucoup de jeunes qui font part de la conversation. Donc, c'est vrai, on voit le droit de l'enfant en action. Parfait. Il y a aussi d'autres droits que je ferai spécifiques. C'est le droit de partager librement nos idées. On en a discuté. Il y avait un problème pas forcément un problème, mais il y avait des enjeux de transparence. Est-ce qu'on n'est pas forcément assez informé des enjeux relatifs aux armements nucléaires? Donc, c'est vraiment l'importance de partager librement nos idées. Le gouvernement devrait nous encourager à participer, à partager nos idées. Et aussi, un droit que les enfants ont, qui est spécifique, pas spécifique aux enfants, mais qui est protégé par la Convention, c'est le droit de rejoindre des groupes et de discuter, en fait, de ces idées que vous avez. Donc, voilà. Ça fait un peu rapidement le tour de ce que je voulais dire sur la Convention. Et aussi discuter de la Déclaration des droits de l'enfant de Genève de 2024, qui est une déclaration qui a été écrite en 2024 pour venir renforcer ces droits-là. On a vu qu'il y avait un recul des droits de l'enfant dans le monde. Il y a un recul des droits de la personne en général, mais principalement des droits de l'enfant. Et c'est venir réaffirmer les obligations des États envers les enfants pour les générations futures. Et la génération maintenant et les générations futures. Ça rappelle principalement l'importance de protéger les enfants en tant que quand il y a des conflits armés. C'est aussi protéger l'environnement. Être sûr qu'on soit capable de bénéficier d'un environnement qui est sécuritaire et sûr pour tout le monde, pour les générations à venir et pour maintenant. Et il y avait aussi le point... vous avez une copie de la convention sur vos tables aussi. C'est le point, si je le retrouve... Bon, peu importe. Mais c'est, le point 3, l'importance d'être écouté, en fait. Ça, on rappelle aux institutions, en fait, l'importance d'écouter les enfants parce que c'est avec ce mélange de savoir intergénérationnel, vos différents points de vue, les différents points de vue des enfants, les points de vue des adultes, qu'on peut vraiment former une opinion puis bâtir quelque chose de solide pour les générations à venir. Donc, voilà. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. J'espère que vous avez appris quelque chose. C'est bon.
Merci beaucoup, Clara. Je suis vraiment contente que tu as fini avec la déclaration de Genève parce qu'en effet, il y a des copies sur vos tables et je vous encourage à signer cette déclaration. Vous pouvez scanner le code et la signer tous pour déclarer qu'on aime les droits de l'enfant. Bon. Donc, notre prochain panéliste, M. Éloge Butera, est un défenseur des droits humains canado-rwandais. Il a consacré sa vie à la promotion de la justice sociale et des droits humains. Il est diplômé de l'école de droit à McGill et a plus d'une douzaine d'années d'expérience en tant que fonctionnaire public œuvrant dans les politiques et le droit international, parmi d'autres enjeux. Notamment, M. Butera a travaillé avec l'honorable Irwin Cotler, ministère de la Justice. Il a aussi avisé l'ancien sénateur Roméo Dallaire en tant que directeur du Centre d'excellence africain pour les enfants, la paix et la sécurité vis-à-vis son pays natal, le Rwanda. Mesdames et messieurs, M. Éloge Butera.
Good afternoon. Are you still awake? Thank you, honorable senators and colleagues, for this opportunity. Je suis parfaitement bilingue. Je peux répondre à toute question en français, mais je vais aussi faire une partie de mes remarques en anglais. Donc, feel free to use any of the languages that you're comfortable in the conversation. I will try to be very brief, or hopefully we'll catch up on the agenda to really make a few observations from the heart on the issue that has us here in the halls of Parliament on a day. I know many of you are too young to have kids, but you know people who have kids who are at home working on a snow day, which is a lot of fun. So I'm glad that you're here, not having fun in the snow. What are we really talking about here? The nuclear weapons, if you think about them and you talk to professionals in the military, they are not really a weapon. They are a fear you need to put in your opponents so that their imagination can make them choose a course of action or behave in a particular way. So nearly 80 years since they were last used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we heard presentations about that. What do these devices mean to our generation? when in reality they ought to be considered for what they are, an unacceptable and an inhumane risk and mortgage on our future, because their existence or their use puts in peril the habitability or the enjoyment of our own place in this planet. So we talked about children's rights, it's one thing, but our very own human rights to be free to move or to breathe or to exist becomes perilous once you entertain the possibility of the use of these devices. I know you will get into the details of the technology itself, nuclear technology, which I hope many of you will go on to be scientists who are able to bend this technology to help us with the climate change crisis we're dealing with, to help us deal with the health needs of treating cancer and other things that we are dealing with. But the process of weaponizing the technology, which in the discourse of professionals is about deterrence and the calculations about who strikes first and the back and forth. Unfortunately, we are living in an age where international norms that have contained these systems are unraveling all around us. And you and I have the lack of youth to have many years ahead of us where we have to contend with the policy choices, with the political choices that comes with the increased risk of these devices being used again somewhere on our planet. And that is unacceptable. Hence the call for really ban them if you can. But the other challenge I want to put in your mind is that even the fear itself is unacceptable. The fact that we've moved from a process of reducing the warheads, I think as of last year, the count was around 12,100 warheads available. The deployment of either one of them is a problem. So in concrete terms, in a place like Ukraine, where millions of people live in the shadow of waking up one day and one of those devices have been used in now what gets sanitized with language to say, well, in a tactical fashion. Well, it's not a strategic one, it's a tactical one, as if that makes a difference, is changing the prospect of how we live with each other, what the rules of warfare and what the rules of peace should look like. The proliferation of these weapons, like I mentioned, the reduction of their numbers should be an actual objective that we pursue in our lifetime, because the risk is simply unacceptable. But their proliferation is another risk, because it's a political choice in North Korea and in Iran, and it's a risk that once an opponent has one, it's a very direct invitation to get one. It's how the relations between nations have been since their invention. So your opponents get one, you get two, and you simply start calculating this race to annihilation. So I put to you that yes, we are lucky to have parliamentarians who are dedicated to really this call to ban the weapons and disarm. But even the professionals in this, in the military, don't really consider this to be tools of doing war. They are tools to strike an idea in the mind of your opponent. But in the end, the risk they represent is beyond what we should be willing to accept in a world that is more interdependent than we maybe some politicians these days are willing to admit. I will stop here because we need to get into conversation. My work has been mostly in the space of public safety, defense and security, and advising politicians, so behind closed doors, not talking too much about what all this means. But what this should mean for us is, as we confront a future that looks more uncertain, when I think MP Hedy, the Honorable Hedy Fly, was explaining that people are worried about the paying their mortgage, pocketbook issues. The question of whether this planet can be livable if you get in the business of detonating these weapons, if you get in the business of refining them, the process of refining them that they can be used in quantities that maybe kills fewer people but does the same amount of damage or makes places uninhabitable, all those paths are simply leading us into an even more dangerous world in which you will have to lead as young parliamentarians, I'm hoping, a world that will see our fellow citizens afraid and with few tools at their disposal to solve problems that should matter. The issue of cancer or climate change and the science that this technology can help us solve are not to be, they are not trivial matters. But the science and the way it's moving is at the pace where the capacity to proliferate these tools is also expanding exponentially. While you needed to have gone to MIT and paid too much money to know how to actually put any of these things together, I suspect ChatGPT can teach you, can get you half the way, and more technologies are coming to the fore where countries like Korea that have been under sanctions can put these things together and get to dozens of warheads. It's not hard to imagine extremists and other actors putting this together, which should put really the policy of those interested in national security or defense to reducing and eliminating the count from 12,000 and counting to actually zero, and have zero tolerance to new actors acquiring these devices, because in a context of Iran, as a human rights activist, is buying with fear a license to continue a systemic oppression and violation of human rights of your own citizens. And we shouldn't be putting up with it, and you shouldn't let us and our political leaders forget that they shouldn't be putting up with it. So let me stop here and start a conversation. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Éloge. I see that we're tired, so I'll take advantage of my seat to ask one question, and then I would love to welcome some questions from the crowd, and then we're going to go to our break next. So, ce que moi j'aimerais vous demander, c'est vous faites partie de mon bloc recherche. Donc, je voulais vous demander si vous pourriez peut-être parler un peu du rôle de la recherche dans le plaidoyer, et dans ça, quel est le rôle de la jeunesse? Est-ce que la jeunesse a un rôle dans la recherche?
Oui, en fait, je pense que la jeunesse, je vais commencer par la fin de ta question. Je pense que la jeunesse a beaucoup de rôle dans la recherche. Je pense que c'est des conversations que, en tant qu'académicien, on devrait avoir avec tout le monde, notamment avec les jeunes. Avoir leur perception, avoir leur vision du monde pour qu'on soit capable de créer quelque chose et d'influencer, en fait, les politiques. Parce que en fait, ce qu'on fait en matière de protection des droits de l'enfant, c'est protéger les droits de l'enfant, mais on a besoin d'avoir la perspective des jeunes. De comment vous voyez vos droits, comment on peut les intégrer dans les conversations académiques pour faire en sorte que ça reflète en fait la réalité de vos attentes. Merci.
Absolutely. I think there's never, one is never too young to have a vested interest in the future of our society and of our country. But you can't go into that space with passion alone. Passion is not enough. You need to put in the hustle of overnight and a lot of coffee and reading to understand the context, because it's an exercise. We are trained to be lawyers. Our friends who are trained to be scientists have a place to do, but it's an exercise in persuasion. And it's hard to convince people if you don't understand the history, if you don't understand the patterns and the dynamics that are shaping some of the dynamics we are dealing with at this particular moment. So the Observatory, the UN is definitely, I would say, in the last 2 weeks, the most perilous position that it's been in about 80 years, because everything is subject to some measure of transaction and other. But we are also, at least if you pay attention to history, this is a path we can simply not cruise control through. We can't just entertain our way to an even more complicated and difficult place. So the point of research and the point of this type of institution is to be able to really be equipped with knowledge, but also really the ability to have, as trained in law, is the possibility to have disagreement and to we say in French, qui chauffe les idées jaillit la lumière. Donc, you need to be able to be patient enough, but also engaged enough to confront disagreement with humility, so that hopefully you can learn something worth holding on to as we navigate an even more uncertain space. So the time for research and the time for really the best of the classical traditions of the academy has never been better than now, because really it's I would say now is the moment where we all need to get comfortable with our own doubts and the patience to agonize over them together, and that's part of what the observatory is supposed to do, so that maybe we can make our way through this mess together.
Merci. That was very well said. I liked passion is not enough. So all of you should be drinking more coffee, is what I took from that. Let's take a couple of questions, please.
Okay. I'll encourage the students to take a bit more time to, frame their questions. So I'll just take a moment to just ask my one question. So I'm Bea, the education coordinator from MARL, so the Manitoba Association for Rights and Liberties. Large part of the work that I do is to provide human rights workshops for students. And I just wanted to ask you if you have any advice for educators teaching these topics. We teach the rights of the child to a number of elementary students. And I often get really difficult questions from, fourth graders. How can we, pardon the language, this is literally what they asked. How can we believe the rights of the child? Because we have a card game that we play with them. And one of them is the safety of children. And then they have the right to play, the right to be safe. and a lot of the students were refugees. So do you have any suggestions for educators into maybe there's a lot of doubt in young students' minds with the United Nations and with what they're seeing online. So how do we kind of bridge that to uphold human rights values and these rights while also addressing the mistrust that they might be feeling? Yeah, if you have any suggestions on that, that'd be great, because I'm in that position, like I don't know what to do. So yeah, thanks.
It's a very good question. I think what I will say is to have children rights as part of a more global conversation. We may have doubts about how can we apply it in a concrete reality. I think we all have those doubts. I do have those doubts in my research, but I think it's to view children's rights as something that is very global, something that we can see in large scale, but also in everyday activity. It's to have those discussions, to have those understanding of what they are, because sometimes we just don't know what they are, and parents may not know what they are as well. And it's to engage with that and to just be more aware of it, because I think a lot of people don't know their rights in general, and being able to know our rights and be able to advocate for them, I think that may also be very empowerment. Yeah. So maybe that's what I would say.
Listen, I would say I have a kid who's grade 5 age, so what I'm learning as a parent is that there's no spin. These guys are they're on and awake, and the world is making them grow up way too fast. But listen, I am a fellow Winnipegger. I don't know. I should have guessed that the people from Winnipeg would be here in person in this weather. But there is a certain temptation that is coming from these little devices we're all carrying around ourselves. That it's a trick. It's like a magic trick. You're all of a sudden connected with everybody, but you're so alone. Literally, I've seen people sit at the table and text each other about what they order. Never mind. But the key is to figure out, if one is able to pass on anything, is the ability to actually make the experience of our connectivity real. We used to have, when I lived in Winnipeg, there was an ad. It began with a compass. You put a dot in Winnipeg and you turn it around, and then you are the center of everything. I don't know if that still shows up on your TV. I use at the center of everything used to be the saying. But even to get there, it feels far from everything. You're at the center of everything, but yet a little bit far from everything. It's almost a metaphor to a bit of a change we need to do to overcome the trick of these devices. That really, at this young age, there's no shortage of things you should be and you could be afraid of. Nukes, annexation, tariffs. Like, you turn on the radio, there's plenty of fear to come and span in every direction. But really, if there's any tools that are still coming out of the pedagogy and the learning space, is that you allow people to feel connected in a authentic and real ways, that they are connected not only to their immediate surroundings, but to the bigger picture. But not only avoid giving them the impression that they're only connected to the bigger picture, ignoring the actual people who are in front of them, because that's the other temptation that is easy to to reach for. The Winnipeg, as you know, there are issues around reconciliation and the rest. So we can't be solving nuclear technology in Korea, ignoring what is staring at us straight in our face.
I think, J.I., do we have questions online, or can I take another question from the room?
I was just going to repurpose an online question. It was asked in the previous session, but it's applicable here, and they wanted to re-ask. Et en fait, c'est comment les traités internationaux et les organismes comme le TPNW, le TIAN, et le Cour pénal international peuvent-ils constituer des garanties efficaces des droits et des libertés lorsque les principaux pays concernés refusent de reconnaître la légitimité de ces outils? So I'll just repeat it very quickly in English. One of the questions asked was, how can international treaties and bodies like the TPNW or the International Criminal Court be effective safeguards for rights and freedoms when key countries in question refuse to even recognize the legitimacy of these institutions?
That's a very good question, but I think it's, I may be over-optimistic, but I think it's to keep talking about our rights, is to keep promoting our rights, keep defending our rights, even though a big actor may not see them as relevant, is to put them on the table every time we have the chance and say, like, we're not going to budge on that. Those are our fundamental rights. Those are, it could be the rights of the child, it could be like human rights, because children's rights are human rights, but in a more global factor, human rights, we should say it's our non-negotiable. We should stick with them and always try to apply them to everything we do. So even if people don't want to recognize them, advocate for them, knowing them, and always like try to say, well, we have, like, Canada have signed the Convention on the Right of Children, and all the other countries in the world, except the United States, have signed it. So technically, with international law, we have to respect those agreements. We have to respect our agreement, and we may not see that we are respecting it. So highlight what we see. Well, I don't think we are fully respecting that, like, those rights in this context. So be part of that conversation and say we should do better on that. I think that's a good way to maybe start and maybe build some traction on that.
The most important, I like the use of the word guarantee, who's the guarantor of the rights. It's really not the treaty alone or the adjudicators or the potential remedies. It's the citizens who, at the international level, can actually affect change in how their own countries and their own government behave. So my humble suggestion would be that we revisit how we teach citizenship in this particular current moment, because that is what is at stake. It's if the powers that be succeed in depressing our sense of agency and citizenship, then there's nothing left to be using to demand rights or exercise these rights. It's all about whims and vibes. But what we could do is rethink our sense of what it means to be a citizen and how that is really the guarantor of how states behave with each other, because I think the preoccupation is right. The ICC is under now a sanctions regime by the biggest power on the planet. Many of the norms and treaties we thought were binding for some people, including the people who negotiated them, all of a sudden don't bind. So it's a murky and messy time to be alive, but listen, maybe the saying is right. We are blessed to be alive in an interesting time, and there's something we can do about that. Merci.
I think we have a question over here. Can you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Cadence Sharples, and we're from Lord Selkirk Regional.
And I'm Ashley Godelowicz.
We kind of have a two-part question. At what age should we start educating children about our future with nuclear weapons?
And also, it is not talked about in our school, so do you believe it should be added in the curriculum?
Sure. Well, listen. Now is fine because I feel that at least I know my son comes home and he's like, and what is the nuclear fusion technology and how does it work? So the key is, I think the questions are there. The issue is finding a truthful way to give a complete and useful answer. And the answer is you really don't need to be adding more nightmares. The poor kids are anxious enough. They lived through COVID. If you are old enough to be asking these questions, you've lived through COVID already, and you went to school and you have to wash yourself, and it's all insane and gross. So they are, I think, comfortable with apocalyptic levels of nightmare. You don't need to be adding a few more, but the key is to find that balance between the truth about what is really right to be worried about now and what is a sense of really empowering them to have a sense of agency about and curiosity to be learning about useful tools and solutions that may come affront. At least that's what my spouse and I are trying to do, but we'll tell you, their therapist when they're older will tell you how that worked out.
If I can add from what Éloge said, I don't think there's a specific age. I think it's part of, like, if you're interested in that topic, and just always built on those interests. I think that's really important. And if it should be in the curriculum, I'm not a teacher. I don't want to say on that, but I think if youth are interested in a topic, I think no discussion should be limited. We should not do any type of censorship, but it should always be age appropriate, obviously. But if we're interested in a question, we want to have more information on it. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can engage young people, as young as elementary school people, on those topics, because why not? And they might have a perspective that are different from what we have, and we just have everything to learn and nothing to lose. So yeah.
Merci. I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take one more question. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Amelia McFarlane. I'm from Lord Selkirk, Manitoba. And so this is it's almost like a follow-up question from my classmates, Cadence and Ashley. So I was just wondering, if we were to start educating kids on nuclear technology, I fear a common misassumption of nuclear deterrence being a good option may be made. I was just wondering of how we could possibly avoid this.
Can you say at least a word or two about what you mean by nuclear deterrence? What would be the assumption?
I just think like how we have right now, where they, like countries have nuclear weapons, and that is what's stopping a nuclear war. The countries having the weapons. Where right now we are trying to push for non-proliferation, just completely get rid of the weapons, is what I believe most people in this room believe in.
Thank you. No, that's a very good question. The point I was making is that there's non-proliferation. Don't allow anybody to be acquiring these devices anymore. And then we actually need to be in the business of disarmament. People need to be getting rid of these weapons. Now, the doctrines of around deterrence, and it's really basic psychology, and how do you assess if people have truly been deterred or not? Because the risk of not assuming that they are deterred and they are not is actually high. And with the kind of global politics we are experiencing this moment, one sure thing is that you can't predict anything anymore about anybody. And that is what is almost changing in this particular moment, that the assumptions we used to have, that there are norms and you build alliances, you can predict. We used to write long papers about how these governments will behave and why. All of those things are being shaken up and up in the air. So I think really the point of arguing in favor of disarmament and non-proliferation is exactly the exasperated risk of miscalculating what you assume to be a deterrence, and it turns out that nobody actually cares, or people think that they can assume those risks beyond what you have calculated. And the shift in the technology, I think, is giving us that risk even more, because we now think we can control them more. You can basically not take out a giant city like Hiroshima, but you can take out a targeted village on a narrow street. But those illusions are likely to actually make this technology and these weapons even more dangerous and not less so, which is why, yes, the deterrence, if it works, fine, but the chances that it will work in Trump's world is almost non-existent.
En fait, bon point, en fait, c'est... I'm not sure how to say it in English, mais la remise en question. I think it's really important to be able to teach young people to say, like, well, always questioning what are the status quo is, and say, like, why do we believe that, and why are the risks of only assuming that is the correct way to proceed. I think it's really important to put that in the conversation and having an honest conversation on this is what we know, this is what we think is best, but also be able to and willing to say, I might be wrong. And I think that is a very hard discussion to have, that we might be wrong on what we think was right, and being able to, one, feel that discomfort and also move forward with that and say, like, what can we do? And so yeah, I think that's maybe a good approach to say deterrence may or may not work, as Éloge said, and what can we do forward? Like, how can that work, and what are the limits of that, and are we willing to take those risks, and having that type of conversation.